Continuing our conversation on how authors can creatively, ethically, and legally be using AI in their author business, we're going to talk about how you can be using AI, artificial intelligence, to help you understand the world building that you are creating. Specifically, given the framework of the world that you're building, what would the fears and frustrations of the community be that could then lead to your inciting incident, major plot points inside of your story, or that big anchor finish to your novel? So we're going to be taking a look at feeding information about the world you're building. You're building a fantasy world, a sci-fi world, some type of world that's other than our contemporary world. And you are going to be asking AI to help you identify some of those push points that we can use to further our plot along, to be side notes, or to be major inciting incidents inside of our stories. Now, with all AI, it does learn from the past. So if you are just jumping in, you're going to want to give an introduction to this AI to let it know who you are and what you're looking for. The more information that you can give it, the easier it is going to be for it to give you valuable information back. Now, you can be including an introduction even if you've done it before. I like to frame mine with a different lens every time I do it. So I have introduced myself as an author who does sci-fi and fantasy and all the different types of things that I do. For this one, I'm looking specifically at a dystopian, a sci-fi based novel. So I'm giving that information up front. You can choose to do that. You can choose not to do it, but the more information you give it, the better framework it's going to have to give you information back. Now, we do have other episodes on your world building, how you can be checking it, and how you can be using it for case studies. This is just one of many, so follow along with that playlist for more creative ways that you can be using AI inside of your author career. Okay. So with this, you are going to jump into your AI generator and you're going to put in your prompt. Now, I like to start my prompt off with that information. So I said, I'm a multi-time best-selling fiction author who writes sci-fi stories. I gave it that framework. I then go on to talk about the world building that I am creating for this novel. Now, this is not an actual novel. If this sounds interesting to you or if it sounds tropey to you, feel free to use it. Feel free to identify other books. It's just an example for you guys. It says, I'm creating a dystopian world where technology has been outlawed. There's a strict 9 p.m. curfew for all citizens. Everyone must wear a wristband that transmits information back to the government, including medical information, location information, etc. Things like art and music are banned. So you can see I'm really building this out. I'm giving as much information as possible. I could do this in a bullet point list. I could do this in paragraph form. It's up to me. It's up to you what you want to input in to get information back out. I continue on by saying people are encouraged to focus on work, all of which benefits the community and not the individual, and spend their time learning new skills that also benefit the community. Each town is responsible for their own community garden, merchandise, and home good creation, and creating the things that they need to live their daily lives outside of their work for the government. Everyone is assigned a job based on an aptitude test. Everyone has a role to play in society. Anyone who steps out of line goes through a series of progressively worse punishments until they're removed from society, and no one knows what happens to these people. So then I give the most important line in this piece of information I'm feeding into it. And this can be as long or as short as you want. But again, the more information and the more detailed information you can give it, the better. I end by saying, what kinds of things would people fear in that world that would keep them from taking action in the story? Now, I could be more specific on this. I could say, what would keep them from taking action against the government? What would keep them from taking action from fleeing the country? What would give them pause when taking action about X, Y, and Z? But I didn't. I left it a little blank and a little vague so that we can see what it comes up with. We're going to go ahead and let it think about this for a second. And as it does, we are going to kind of go through some of these bullet points. So it starts off by saying, and this is going to spit out a lot, so I'm going to move back up a little bit so we can read this. It starts by saying, in this dystopian world, the people would likely fear several consequences that would deter them from taking action against the oppressive government. So it has made that decision for me. It's not about necessarily escaping or getting out. It is about taking action against the oppressive government. So number 1, surveillance and punishment. The wristbands act as a surveillance device tracking every citizen's movements and activities. People would be fearful of stepping out of line, as any deviation from the government's strict rules could result in punishment. The fear of being caught and subjected to progressively worse punishments would keep most individuals compliant and afraid to rebel. Okay, that makes sense, right? That's a logical conclusion. They keep going on with number 2. And if you wanted, you could ask for this in bullet point form. You could ask for this in paragraph form. You could ask for a summary of this. I just let it go and it gave me a number of different points. I typically ask for like a certain number of paragraphs or a certain number of points. So it's learned that I kind of like certain numbers and it offers those for me. But I can then come back in. If I didn't like it like this, I could say, this is too much information for me. I could go back and say, I need a bullet point list of this. Now, this is pretty bullet point, but it does have a lot of words here, so it can break it up differently or it can give me more or less. Number 2 says isolation and exile. The mysterious fate of those who were removed from society would instill fear in the hearts of the citizens. Nobody knows what happens to those who defy the government, and the prospect of being exiles and cut off from their community, friends, and family would deter most from taking any significant actions against the regime. Okay, number 3 goes on to say informants and betrayal, which is actually pretty interesting sounding. We love that. And it is going to say the tight-knit community setup where everyone has a designated role would breed distrust among the people. Fear of informants or betrayal by friends or family members would prevent individuals from openly discussing their dissatisfaction or planning any form of resistance. That is such a good and valuable point. People aren't going to freely have communication about this because you never know who's going to rat you out. So that could be something you heavily lean into for your story. Number 4, lack of individuality. The ban on music, art, and personal expression would lead to a homogenized society where individuality is stifled. People might fear standing out or expressing their true selves, or for fear of being seen as a threat to the government's control. Uncertainty and fear-mongering. We love to hear that when it comes to especially dystopian ebooks. The government would likely use fear tactics to maintain control. They may spread rumors about the dire consequences of disobedience. Oh, I love that. Because oftentimes we jump into stories and we think, oh, well, the consequences have to be real. What if they don't? What if they don't have to be real? What if they are lies spread by the government saying all these horrible things are going to happen, even though they haven't, to make sure they maintain that control? Then that could be a major plot point of them discovering it was all a lie. There's a lot you can do with this. So you can kind of see how this is going through and giving us a lot of really good opportunities to work with for a book. Indoctrination and propaganda. The education system and media would likely be controlled by the government, promoting the idea that their way of life is best and the only way to maintain order and protect society. This indoctrination will make people hesitant to question the system. And then we go on for 7, limited access to information. The government controls information flow, restricting that knowledge that could help challenge the narrative. Without alternate perspectives or historical context, citizens might believe that resistance is futile or misguided. So that's one I really like to be able to lean into, because they don't have access to other ways of thought. They might think this is it. This is all we have and we can't do anything about it. So that could be a really good opportunity to find things from the past, to bring in people who are, shunned from the community and know about what happened in the past. All sorts of things you can work on with this one. Loss of essential services is number 8. The community's reliance on the government for basic needs like food and goods would make the prospect of resistance seem even riskier. People might fear losing access to essential services if they challenge the status quo, which could create a sense of dependency and reluctance on taking action. And then, of course, there's the collective mindset, the strong emphasis on communal work and benefiting the community over the individual that might create a sense of unity and loyalty to the system. People might fear disrupting this balance would lead to chaos and harm the ones that they are caring about. And then they go on to say to create tension and conflict in your story, and they give us some ideas for that. So let's say we like these. Let's say that we want to pick one of these and we want to ask a little bit more about it. So if you don't like these, you can either hit the regenerate response button. It'll give you more information or more ideas. You can say, I don't like number 7, give me something else. Or if you don't think that this is enough, say, give me 5 more reasons. And you can get more information from there. You can kind of mitigate what works and what doesn't work for you. And the more you teach it, the easier it's going to know what to give you. So let's say we want to talk a little bit more about the propaganda that the government could potentially control. I'm going to say, tell me more about the propaganda the government might use. And we're just going to see what it says. It's going to take a second. It's going to think this through, and we're going to be able to have a really good conversation about, here we go, about some of the things that we could potentially be seeing. So as the government is going to be kind of controlling this narrative, they're going to use fear-mongering. The government would use fear to keep citizens compliant. They might spread exaggerated or fabricated stories about the danger of technology, individualism, or life outside the controlled society. Guys, it's a pure dystopian, and we love it. They could emphasize the chaos and the destruction that supposedly occurred in the past when technology was freely available. They have false narratives of security. The propaganda would paint a picture of utopia utopian society where everyone is safe and well cared for under the government's watchful eye. They might present statistics or fabricated incidents to show that crime and unrest are virtually non existent in their controlled communities. And then we would talk down about outsiders. We would have historical or heroic portrayals of government officials. We would have censorship of dissent. We would have rewriting history. Oh, that's a good one. I talk about that a lot with my retellings. I love to rewrite history. And I love to point out that the history books were written by the people who won, not necessarily what actually happened. False promises, dehumanization of rebels, cult of personality. The government might cultivate a cult like following around its leaders, projecting an image of infallibility and divine authority. The approach would make people feel a strong emotional connection to the ruling figures and be less likely to question their decisions. There's so much that we could work with. We could have a full conversation with this AI about what that might look like. Should they be creating kind of like a cult-like following for their leadership? So even though the government itself would not necessarily be a cult, they wouldn't have necessarily the undertones of that cult, having that allegiance to specific key leadership could be a huge part of your story outside of the rest of the community, outside of the rest of society. So you're going to have the ability to ask a lot of questions, to have a lot of really good conversation. Now, I actually filmed this video earlier and we had some tech glitches. So this is the second time I'm filming it. I know I keep saying that. We think we've handled the tech issues, or at least the developmental team is working on it and they've given me another way to do this in the meantime. But I want to take a look at the one that we had because I feel like when I did this a few days ago, there was actually a really good point that they brought up. So I just want to go through and make sure I didn't forget anything that I thought would be really helpful to you. Lack of role models, hopelessness, economic dependency. I think that was probably the one I was working for. It was. So economic dependency, since the society is designed to be self-sustaining, people may fear losing access to essential resources and goods if they oppose the government. The fear of survival and the inability to provide for their families might dissuade individuals from taking action. So then I went on to ask, can you tell me a little bit more what that would look like about that economic dependence? So government-controlled economy, rationing and allocation, which I really love this. Work credit system, that was a fantastic conversation as well. To access additional goods or privileges, citizens must earn work credits through their assigned jobs. These credits are then used as a form of currency within the controlled economy. The more work credits a person has, the better the standard of living and access to non-essential items. So you all have the same basic living, and then you can work harder at specific jobs that you are assigned, and that kind of creates a caste system in what we have to be looking at inside of the society. There's a lot that you can do. It goes on for limited access and punitive measures and suppressing self-sufficiency and lack of entrepreneurship. There's so many really good conversations we could be having here, and I love the fact that we can keep asking questions down those lines. So if you're seeing things and they work for you, great. But it is always worth it to try it a second time as well, or to ask for more examples as well. Because like I said, I tried this a few days ago when we were having tech issues, and I loved that answer. I loved that we now have this work credit system where people can earn their way if they were given the privilege of earning their way to extra things. And that, of course, is assigned by the aptitude test, aka the government. And the government can then say, we pick you to be a little bit higher than everybody else, or to be able to do the extra work to get the extra things while that's holding other people back. There's so much you can do with that. And it didn't give it to me in the second time we did it for today's video. And so being able to ask questions and continue to have those conversations is going to be really, really important with your AI to flesh out what you can and cannot be doing inside of your world building. And this is a really good opportunity for you to learn what the fears and frustrations would be. Because yes, we could sit down and we could have those conversations. Sure, we could come up with the idea of the caste system based on the work credits. We could come up with that ourselves. But what if we didn't have to sit there and go through 20 different ideas to get to the one? What if I didn't have to do an hour's worth of work? I could just have it give me lots of information, and then I could pick some things, ask more questions, or flesh them out myself and not have the AI do it. All of these things can then be implemented into the inciting incident, major plot points, or that anchor finish to my novel to give me somewhere to write to. This way, it takes a lot of the work and the time-intense effort before I start my writing out of my hands. I do not have to worry about figuring out the fears and frustrations, but this also gives me the opportunity to then connect it back to my community. Because sure, This has impacts on your main character, on your love interest, on the people very close to them, but more so than that, it's impacting the community, the society as a whole. The citizens around them are going to react in certain ways based on how they understand their world. So let's just say there is kind of like a caste system and we're challenging that. How are the people going to react? Maybe a little bit differently than reacting to something else. So, this is going to be very good at defining how the people in the world around, the neighborhoods, the people on the street, the people on the train, the people that they're bypassing, the people who are standing in the crowd, how they're going to react to certain situations. This is about our world building. It's about our character development of people who are not our main characters. And it's really about taking a lot of that work off of our plate so that we can lean heavily into what we need to be doing inside of our story. Now, if you like this creative idea, go ahead and drop a comment down below. Let us know what your favorite part was and which of these you would want to use in your dystopian sci fi upcoming novels. And let me know if you want more creative ideas like this on how authors can creatively, ethically, and legally be using AI inside of their businesses. Don't forget, we have a full playlist on publishing and AI, as well as a legal playlist with everybody's favorite IP and entertainment lawyer, Tony, as we both break down the upcoming and the current court cases so you know what you can and cannot do legally to protect your work or not protect your work, and the creative ideas that you can be using to save yourself time and effort as you're creating your author profession. We'll see you in the upcoming episodes and daily episodes to help you navigate the world of publishing so this can be your most profitable year ever through your online social media marketing, your content creation, your writing, your publishing, and everything connected to it. We'll see you in the upcoming episodes.